For 3 years, the American economy was told it was unbreakable. We were told the labor market was a fortress, a high employment miracle that could withstand any interest rate hike, any geopolitical shock, and any inflationary pressure. But in early 2026, the fortress has finally developed a structural crack. The red line has been crossed. The U.S. unemployment rate has officially hit 4.5%. To the casual observer, this sounds low. In the history of modern economics, 4.5% used to be called full employment. But history has a darker side. In the context of the American business cycle, the move from a 3.4% floor to a 4.5% ceiling isn't just a statistic, it is a 100% accurate recession signal. Every single time the unemployment rate has risen by this margin in this time frame, a total economic collapse has followed within 12 months, no exceptions, no soft landings, no escapes. The engine of the American dream is coughing up black smoke, and the dashboard is glowing red. Welcome to the 4.5% threshold. Welcome to the great labor reckoning of 2026. To understand why 4.5% is the death zone, we have to look at the Sahm Rule. Developed by economist Claudia Sahm, the rule is simple but terrifyingly accurate. When the 3-month moving average of the unemployment rate rises by 0.50 percentage points or more relative to its low during the previous 12 months, the economy is in a recession. In 2026, we haven't just met the Sahm Rule, we have obliterated it. We have moved from the historic lows of the mid-threes to a sustained 4.5%. Why does this matter? Because unemployment is a lagging indicator. By the time the government's Bureau of Labor Statistics, BLS, reports a 4.5% figure, the actual real-time unemployment on the ground is often much higher. Businesses do not fire people the moment things get bad. They stop hiring first, then they cut bonuses, then they cut part-time hours. By the time they start the mass layoffs, the recession is already in the room. In 2026, the Sahm Rule isn't just a formula, it's a biopsy. It tells us that the virtuous cycle of spending and earning has reversed into a vicious cycle of saving and firing. When 4.5% of the workforce is sidelined, the velocity of money stops. The consumer, who represents 70% of the U.S. GDP, stops moving. In previous recessions, 1991, 2008, 2020, the blue-collar worker was the first to feel the axe. Manufacturing and construction were the front lines. But the 2026 labor collapse has a different face. This is the White-Collar Purge. The 4.5% threshold is being driven by the liquidation of middle management and knowledge workers. In the tech hubs of San Francisco, the financial corridors of New York, and the corporate parks of Charlotte, the mass layoffs are targeting the $150,000 a year earners. Why? Because in 2026, the cost of human capital has been reevaluated against the cost of debt and AI. For years, companies overhired as a form of labor hoarding. They sat on surplus staff because they feared they couldn't find talent later. But with interest rates remaining at restrictive levels and corporate debt needing to be refinanced at 8%, that surplus labor is now an intolerable liability. The middle manager is being replaced by the algorithm. The high salary administrative layer is being liquidated to service the interest on corporate bonds. This isn't a temporary layoff, it's a permanent structural removal. When a white-collar worker loses a job in 2026, they aren't finding another one at the same salary. They are entering the underemployment trap. One of the most insidious parts of the 2026 4.5% threshold is the ghost job phenomenon. For the last year, the job market appeared strong because of job openings. But in 2026, we realized that 40% of those openings were fake. Ghost jobs are listings posted by companies that have no intention of hiring. They are posted to keep current employees productive. Look, we are trying to find help, to placate shareholders, or to collect resumes for a future that never comes. When the 4.5% unemployment rate hit the news, the reality of the ghost job became clear. The tight labor market was an illusion created by digital noise. In reality, the ratio of real jobs to applicants has collapsed to its lowest level since 2009. People are applying for 200 roles and receiving 0 responses. The 4.5% figure is the polite version of the truth. If you include the discouraged worker, the person who has given up looking entirely, the real 2026 unemployment rate is likely closer to 7%. Economics is a game of psychology. When the 4.5% threshold is crossed, the psychology of the entire nation shifts from growth to survival. This is the consumption cliff. The American consumer is the engine of global growth, but that engine runs on confidence. When a neighbor loses their job, you become worried. When you see mass layoffs at a major company like Google, Ford, or Goldman Sachs, you stop spending. You cancel the vacation. You don't buy the new car. You stop going out to dinner. In 2026, this precautionary saving is the death knell for the economy because your spending is someone else's income. When you stop spending, the local restaurant sees a drop in revenue. They can no longer afford their staff. They fire 2 waiters. Those waiters then stop spending. This is the multiplier effect in reverse. Crossing 4.5% is the moment the multiplier turns negative. It is the moment when the economy begins to eat itself. By the time the Fed realizes the consumption cliff is here, the momentum is too great to stop. You cannot interest rate cut your way out of a consumer who is fundamentally afraid of the future. We must address the elephant in the 2026 room, artificial intelligence. In the 2008 recession, the job losses were cyclical. The jobs came back when the economy recovered. In 2026, the job losses are disruptive. Companies are using the cover of a high interest rate recession to permanently replace human roles with AI systems. If a company fires 500 people in 2026, they aren't planning to hire them back in 2027. They are deploying automated customer service, AI-driven legal review, and algorithmic accounting. The 4.5% threshold is the transition point. It is the moment when corporate America decided that the human worker was too expensive and too fragile for the new economic reality. This creates a permanent unemployment layer, a group of workers whose skills have been devalued overnight. This is the structural part of the 4.5%. It's not just that people don't have jobs, it's that the jobs they used to do no longer exist. Why is the firing happening now? Why wasn't it 2024 or 2025? The answer is the corporate debt maturity wall. During the free money era, 2010 to 2021, American corporations gorged on cheap debt. That debt usually has a 5 to 7 year term. In 2026, that debt is coming due. To refinance that debt, companies are moving from a 3% interest rate to an 8% or 9% rate. For many companies, this increase in interest expense is larger than their entire profit margin. To stay cash flow positive, and satisfy their lenders, they only have one lever left to pull, the payroll axe. In 2026, the CFO is the one making the firing decisions, not the HR manager. They are looking at the interest payments due in Q3 and Q4 and realizing they need to cut $50 million from the budget. Payroll is the largest expense, therefore payroll must be cut. The 4.5% unemployment rate is the collateral damage of a corporate world trying to stay solvent in a high interest rate environment. They are sacrificing the employees to save the creditors. We need to look at the quality of the jobs remaining. In 2026, the headline unemployment rate is 4.5%, but the U6 rate, which includes part-time workers who want full-time work, is skyrocketing. This is the part-time trap. To avoid the layoff headline, many companies are simply reducing hours. A full-time employee with benefits is turned into a 20-hour-a-week contractor. This worker is still employed, according to the government, but they can no longer pay their rent or service their 29% credit card debt. This functional unemployment is the silent killer of the 2026 economy. It creates a population that is working but destitute. It hides the true scale of the collapse. When we say the 4.5% threshold is a recession signal, we are talking about the loss of productive stable income, which is the only thing that keeps a modern civilization standing. This is where our two stories collide. In our previous investigation, we looked at the 29% debt trap, the fact that 29% of Americans have more credit card debt than savings. Now add 4.5% unemployment to that equation. In 2008, the average household had some margin. In 2026, the margin is zero. When a person in the 29% group loses their job at the 4.5% threshold, they don't have 2 months to find a new role. They have 2 weeks. The liquidity death spiral accelerates instantly. The first missed payment on the credit card triggers a penalty APR of 35%. The car is repossessed because the automotive debt we will discuss in our next episode is too high. The 4.5% threshold is the trigger event for a mass liquidation of the American middle class. It is the match that lights the dry tinder of household debt. As unemployment crosses 4.5% in 2026, the government and the Federal Reserve are backed into a corner. They have 2 choices, and both are catastrophic. Choice A, save the jobs. They can cut interest rates back to zero and start printing money again. But in 2026, inflation is still a zombie. It's not dead, just hiding. If they print money to save the job market, they will trigger a hyperinflationary spike in food and energy prices. You might have a job, but you won't be able to afford to eat. Choice B, kill the inflation. They can keep rates high to finish the job on inflation, but they will watch the unemployment rate move from 4.5% to 5.5% to 6.5%. They will save the value of the dollar, but they will destroy the people who use it. In 2026, the Fed is paralyzed. The Fed put the idea that the government will always step in to save the market has expired. The 4.5% threshold is the moment the public realizes that no one is coming to save them. There is a term emerging in the boardrooms of 2026, the efficiency era. This is code for a permanent reduction in the labor force. Crossing the 4.5% threshold has changed the social contract. For 70 years, the deal was work hard and you will have a place. In 2026, the deal is work as hard as the AI for less than the AI, or you are irrelevant. This has created a psychological recession. Even those with jobs are living in a state of constant, low-level panic. This anxiety prevents long-term planning. No one is starting businesses. No one is having children. No one is buying homes. The 4.5% unemployment rate is a culture killer. It turns a nation of builders into a nation of hiders. If we look into the mirror of history, the 4.5% threshold is an omen. In 1929, 1974, 2000, and 2008, the initial rise in unemployment was always dismissed as contained or seasonal. In each case, the experts said the labor market was resilient. In each case, they were wrong. The 4.5% mark is the escape velocity of a recession. Once the layoffs reach a certain critical mass, they become self-sustaining. The fire has caught the wind. In 2026, we are repeating the mistakes of the past, but with a more fragile population and more complex debt. We are entering the hard landing that the economists said was impossible. The mirror of history isn't just showing us a recession, it's showing us a restructuring of the American way of life. If the 4.5% threshold has been crossed, what can the individual do? In 2026, the advice is defensive. Become hyper-essential. If your job can be described in a single paragraph, I can do it. You must move into roles that require high-level human empathy, complex physical repair, or system navigation. Build anti-fragile income. Do not rely on a single payroll. In 2026, the side hustle is no longer a luxury, it is a life raft. Liquidity is life. As we have said before, if you are in the 29% group with high debt, your first priority must be to settle or restructure that debt before the layoff happens. The labor freeze of 2026 will be long. This isn't a V-shaped recovery, this is an L-shaped reality. You must prepare to survive in a low employment environment for the next 36 months. The 4.5% unemployment threshold is flashing. It is a siren that most of the media is trying to drown out with noise. But the math doesn't lie. History doesn't lie. The labor market fortress has cracked. The soft landing was a fairy tale told to keep the markets calm while the exits were being crowded. In 2026, your job is no longer a guarantee. It is a temporary lease on your time that can be canceled by an algorithm at any moment. Check your job security ratio. Look at your emergency buffer. The 4.5% threshold isn't just a number, it is the beginning of the next chapter of the American economy. Act accordingly.